This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. So today we're going to be doing an iceberg video. I'm going to do this video in parts because I realized if I did this in all 6 parts one video, it would be like a 4-hour video, and I just think that's too long. And I want to split this up into parts so I can work on it individually and make the video good. So today we're going to be doing level 1 of the iceberg. If you've never seen an iceberg video, you know that the iceberg kind of covers one subject. So we're going to be talking about the Cleveland Browns post-expansion, and each level of the iceberg gets lower. So we start with some of the more well-known information about the Cleveland Browns and stuff that we kind of should all know. And then you get lower and lower into more niche subjects of the iceberg and so on and so forth. So there it is. I'm excited to do this video, but before I do that, let me talk to you about, I'll be going from a list of topics off the top of my head. So forgive me if I get some details wrong here. So we're going to start with level 1 of the iceberg. And we're going to start here with Art Modell, one of the most well-known pieces of history. I feel like this is Browns 101 if you ever choose to become a fan. But it also sometimes surprises me how many people outside of Cleveland don't know why people in Cleveland dislike Art Modell, specifically like Baltimore Raven fans. If I've done this longer, I've interacted with people who cover the Ravens, cover other teams, and they seem to not know like how this history played out. A lot of people, when I talk to them online, still think like the Browns aren't the Browns of old and that the Ravens are the old Browns. Well, this is a refresher on what actually happened. So Art Modell owned the Cleveland Browns. He bought the Cleveland Browns from, I believe, somebody who owned it before, and Paul Brown was kind of a part of ownership at that time. Art Modell did not like that Paul Brown was kind of seen as the owner of the team and the face of the team. The team was literally named after Paul Brown at the time. Art Modell did not love that, and basically he forced Paul Brown out of town. And then later on in Jim Brown's career, he forced Jim Brown out of town. Basically, especially early in Art Modell's ownership of the Browns, he was obsessed with being known as the guy who owns the Browns, and he wanted to be the only one with that reputation. And he was kind of obsessed with being liked. If you watch like the Cleveland '95 documentary, you can tell that that's kind of what he was on. If you listen to his son, and he owned the team. He got rid of Jim Brown eventually, tried to replace him with, I believe, Ernie Hudson, and that didn't work out tragically. Paul Brown obviously got rid of him. Paul Brown then later on gets an expansion franchise in the Cincinnati Bengals. So when I say that Art Modell created the AFC North, what I'm saying is that Art Modell was so incompetent that he fired Paul Brown and forced Paul Brown to start the Cincinnati Bengals. He was so incompetent with his money that he not only lost the Browns' history and name and trademarks, but he also had to sell his ownership to make the Baltimore Ravens because he wanted a new stadium. There's a whole lot of details on there that I'm probably going to mess up if I try to recount off the top of my head. So he created the Ravens, and then he created the new Browns because he couldn't manage his money. So that's Art Modell in a nutshell. He is probably one of the most incompetent owners in NFL history. On the list of people he's forced off of his team, Jim Brown, arguably the greatest football player of all time. Paul Brown, arguably the greatest head coach of all time. And then Bill Belichick in 1995, as he moved the team to Baltimore, did not want to keep Bill Belichick, fired Bill Belichick, and by proxy, Nick Saban. Art Modell should never be in the Hall of Fame. level one still expansion. So the Browns were an expansion franchise in 1999, but still got to keep all of their history before the team technically became the Ravens. So this gets a lot of people confused, even to this day, especially a lot of younger fans who were born post-expansion, which is a lot of people now. You know, a lot of people were born after 99. It's just we getting old, right? But so the way this breaks down is that the Cleveland Browns took a hiatus from 1995 to 99, from the end of the 95 season to 99. So 96, 97, 98, the Browns are on a hiatus. 99 to 2000 season, they come back as the Cleveland Browns with all their history with an expansion roster. So the Browns have been through expansion, and that's how the Browns have been through an expansion without ever losing their team technically. And the Baltimore Ravens just inherited the Browns roster. So they didn't have an expansion roster. They were able to inherit the Browns roster, but they are an expansion franchise. So the Browns technically kind of an expansion franchise, but not an expansion franchise. The Ravens are an expansion franchise, not an expansion roster. So Browns, again, for those who need it, not an expansion franchise ever, really. They came into the league as a merger team. So the Browns are not an expansion franchise, but they had an expansion roster. Baltimore Ravens are an expansion franchise, did not have an expansion roster. That's how that worked out. This is not a Tennessee Titans, Houston Oilers situation. This is very much different than that, where the Texans came, where they brought a football team back to Houston, but they couldn't call it the Oilers. They couldn't have the same history. They are the Texans. The Browns are the Browns, hilariously enough. Kurt Warner is another one that pops up on here. The reason Kurt Warner pops up on here, I don't know if this is well-known information, but I think it was for a certain generation of fan. Kurt Warner was in the expansion, was eligible to be drafted in the expansion draft when the Browns came back in 1999. Obviously, the Browns chose to go an opposite direction than Kurt Warner, who, again, nobody would have expected, right? Because Kurt Warner was not Kurt Warner at the time. He was just another quarterback in the league. But it is a fun what if to live in that, you know, what if Kurt Warner got drafted by the Browns? The next thing on the iceberg is Orlando Brown blindsided. This is referring to Orlando Brown getting a referee flag thrown in his face that hit his eye so specifically that it blinded him. He was outraged immediately, like very pissed off. Got mad at the referee, but, you know, that only resulted in him getting fined. So that sucks. Bottlegate, for those younger fans who do not know what Bottlegate was or what happened with Bottlegate. Basically, the Browns were in the playoff race. I forget what specific year it was, but they were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who at the time were a division opponent. This is back in the AFC Central before the AFC North. So the AFC Central, I believe the Titans were a part of the AFC Central, and correct me if I'm wrong because I was real young when this happened. But it was the Browns, Ravens, Bengals, Steelers, Titans/Oilers, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that was the old AFC Central. This was before the league got rounded out to 32 teams and then 4 divisions for each conference. So the old AFC Central, Browns are playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're fighting for a playoff spot. They throw the ball to Quincy Morgan. Quincy Morgan catches this football. He did not catch it. You can watch the replay. He did not catch it, but they ruled it a catch. Tim Couch hurries the team up the field, snaps the ball. They run another play. They're getting ready to run a play after that, and they're thinking they're good. While they're getting ready to run the play after the play where Quincy Morgan caught the ball, the referees decided they're going to buzz down and review this play from 2 plays ago. So the outrage from the fans wasn't because the call, right? If they would have called that catch incomplete, I think fans would have understood. It was the fact that they snapped and had another play, and then they decided to go 2 plays back and review it. That's basically like, we know that's the rule. The rule is, fair or not, if you snap the ball after a controversial play, you run a play, that play is no longer reviewable. But they broke the rules to review that play, and it made the fans feel like they're getting screwed more than usual. And if you've been a Browns fan at any time, it don't take much for Browns fans to feel like they're getting screwed. The next thing on this iceberg on level 1 is a Tim Couch injury. This is when Tim Couch got hurt at home, and the fans cheered when he left the field. This has a lot more to do with, I believe, the Kelly Holcomb controversy, right? We know Browns fans love QB controversy. That was like the first of the new rounds, basically. Big Ben, I don't really gotta explain why Big Ben's here on this iceberg. Dominated the Cleveland Browns his whole career. Browns only beat him once in Pittsburgh, and that was in the playoffs in the pandemic with no fans. So there's that. Peyton Hillis is another one on this iceberg because Peyton Hillis had that breakout season, was on that cover of Madden, and then things never went right afterwards. Joe Thomas, obviously on this iceberg because he's Joe Thomas, first Hall of Famer since the Browns came back in 1999. And before Joe Thomas, the Browns, I believe, had one Pro Bowler. One Pro Bowl player, Jameer Miller, and we'll talk about him later, from that period from 99 to 07. Then Joe Thomas came in and, life got a little bit better for the Cleveland Browns, or at least we had a left tackle. Hugh Jackson probably will go down as one of the worst coaches in Cleveland Brown history. And I think that's pretty accurate. He was horrible. Look, I understand not winning a ton of games because the roster's not good, but I don't believe the roster was so bad that you could win one game in 2 years. Like, you had Myles Garrett on the team. Like, you had some guys on the team that you could do a little something with, and 1-31 was never acceptable. So probably one of the worst coaches in Cleveland Browns history, if not the worst coach in Cleveland Browns. I've made the argument before he's one of the worst coaches in sports history if you look at win percentage, especially within that 2-year period. The 0-16 parade was a parade that the Browns threw. Well, not the Browns fans threw around the stadium. This created a lot of ire from like Brown sports talk because it was like pushing a loser mentality. The only thing I remember that I find funny in retrospect about like the backlash on the 0-16 parade was that some of the people who were the loudest about how this 0-16 parade was pushing a loser mentality, ironically enough, push that loser mentality on the radio show every day. So like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the pot calling the kettle black. Like, yeah, was the 0-16 parade kind of embarrassing? I guess if you look at it like that. I see it as fans making the best of a bad situation. Do I think that Browns fans can sometimes be a little eager to embrace what's familiar, and what's been familiar is losing? Yes, I do get frustrated with that because sometimes the situation won't call for, oh, we suck again, but Browns fans can sometimes be eager to jump back in there because that's what they're familiar with, because that's what the team's been for a while. But yeah, I just think the whole backlash around the 0-16 parade, it was just a goofy thing that people did, that Browns fans did because the team sucked. And at that point, hey, man, let fans do whatever they want because you come watch a team that's 0-16, you have the right to do what you want for that year. If you want to throw a parade, whatever, that is your prerogative. Baker Mayfield's on this iceberg. He is probably the most polarizing quarterback in Cleveland Browns history, if I'm being honest with you, because like Bernie Kosar is not as polarizing. Brian Sipe, not like no quarterback is as polarizing as Baker Mayfield. You bring his name up today and people still get mad or still claim that he should be the start. Like, this is our generation's, for whatever reason, because again, Bernie Kosar was like a legit dog in the NFL. But for whatever reason, the Browns getting rid of Baker Mayfield, for some people, they've made it their Belichick benching Bernie Kosar moment. Like, it's not warranted. He wasn't as good as Bernie Kosar, but people have made it their Belichick benching Bernie Kosar moment, like the Mike Lombardi diminished skills tape, and that should be deep on the iceberg, but it's not. I'll explain what that means. So, in 1992, early in Belichick's start with Cleveland, he benched Bernie Kosar. And the reasoning given behind benching him was diminished skills. And that was cut up. That tape of him and his diminishing skills was cut up by Mike Lombardi, who ended up being the GM. And people still have not forgiven Bill Belichick or Mike Lombardi for benching Bernie Kosar. I think Bernie ended up winning the Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys. I think he even played for the Miami Dolphins at one point. But yeah, I mean, the rest of his career ended up being fine with Bernie. I don't think he ever started again regularly for a team after that. So there was probably some truth to the diminished skills there with him. But back to the Baker Mayfield thing, people did that with Baker, and Baker Mayfield never went to 2 AFC championship games. So yeah, most polarizing quarterback in Cleveland Browns history. I kind of hope one day we drop all this bullshit about Baker Mayfield and all this arguing back and forth about him and just decide to accept that it was what it was and it ended when it needed to, so we can embrace him fully as a fan base. But as long as we're arguing about if he should still be on the team and if he shouldn't, it's just goofy. And then we got to talk about the labrum and everything else. But that's that. One of the highlights of Baker Mayfield's run in Cleveland, though, is Corvette. We'll know that year Juju Smith-Schuster was doing these little tic-tac dances. Oh, I said tic-tac like I'm truly old. TikTok dances to this song Corvette. And he was dancing on people's logos, and it was rubbing everybody the wrong way. He got smacked on Monday Night Football. And then before he played the Browns in the playoffs, he said the Browns is the Browns. The Browns won that game in decisive fashion and then danced in Pittsburgh's locker room doing the Corvette dance. It was a moment. It was a time to be alive. But the next year was probably the low point in Baker Mayfield's career in the Cleveland Browns as he tore his labrum, decided to play on it, and played very bad. Now, it's still up to debate how much of that bad play was just the same shit that we saw from Baker Mayfield on and off since 2018, and how much of it was due to the labrum. I think the labrum had something to do with it, but I think it was mainly Baker Mayfield making bad decisions. I think that had a lot to do with it. I don't think he became a bad quarterback because of the labrum tear. I think he was always an inconsistent quarterback, never somebody who saw the field well, and was always streaky because of that. And the Browns recognized that, decided to move on to him and trade for Deshaun Watson. And that's where we're at today. All right. So that's level 1 of this iceberg. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below about level 1.